For centuries, the wealth of the East reached Europe through a stable network of overland trails and Red Sea shipping lanes. That stability vanished in 1453, when the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople. They didn't just take a city, they severed the primary artery of global trade. With Islamic rulers now holding a total monopoly over the traditional routes, the powers of the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, found themselves economically isolated, forced to search for a back door to the Indian Ocean. This wasn't a choice driven by curiosity. The European arrival in India was a desperate pivot to prevent their domestic economies from being choked out by the Ottoman blockade. Beyond the blockade, Europe was also being hollowed out from the inside by a catastrophic domestic crisis. Starting in 1348, the spread of the plague hollowed out the European population. As the workforce died off, agricultural production plummeted, and the income of feudal lords, which depended entirely on peasant labor, collapsed. Desperate lords tried to squeeze the surviving peasants for more revenue, triggering massive revolts that effectively broke the feudal system. In its place, centralized nation-states began to emerge. Because the old agricultural model was no longer profitable, these new states were forced to bankroll global trade as their primary source of survival. They didn't just want to explore, they needed to replace a failing domestic economy with international markets. These first state-backed fleets sailed with a trifold objective: spreading Christianity, securing personal and national glory, and extracting the legendary gold of the East. Vasco da Gama reached Calicut in 1498, leading to the establishment of the first Portuguese factory just 2 years later. After that initial contact, the arrival of the other powers followed a specific sequence: the Dutch in 1606, the English in 1611, the Danes in 1620, and finally the French in 1667. While the timeline is straightforward, the actual methods these companies used to infiltrate the Indian interior were anything but uniform. The first Portuguese viceroy, Francisco de Almeida, realized that attempting to hold a land empire in India was a recipe for failure. He implemented a blue water policy to establish naval supremacy, using coastal outposts to dominate the Arabian Sea. This was enforced through the Cartaz system, a naval licensing model. Every Indian ship had to pay the Portuguese for a pass to sail their own waters. If a ship was caught without a Cartaz, the viceroy's fleet at Goa would seize the vessel and its entire cargo immediately. To maintain this grip, they built feitorias, fortified trading posts that served as both customs houses and naval bases to tax the flow of goods. In 1510, Alfonso de Albuquerque centralized this network by capturing Goa from the Bijapur Sultan, turning it into the capital of their maritime empire. The Portuguese didn't create new Indian Ocean trade routes, they simply militarized the existing ones and extracted a fee from everyone using them. To bridge the gap between Europe and the subcontinent, Albuquerque encouraged his men to marry local women, fostering cultural syncretism along the coast. Missionaries brought more than just a new religion. They introduced the printing press and established a network of schools that provided education in native languages. They also unintentionally re-engineered the Indian diet and economy by importing a massive variety of New World crops. Within a few generations, the potato, sweet potato, and tobacco, black pepper, and groundnut became integrated into Indian agriculture. Long after their naval power had been eclipsed by the English, these agricultural and cultural shifts remained a central part of the subcontinent's identity. The Dutch East India Company arrived in 1602 with a superior shipping technology called the Vloot, a dedicated cargo vessel that was faster and cheaper to operate than the heavy Portuguese ships. Operating as a rigid cooperative cartel, the Dutch focused almost all their energy on the Spice Islands of Indonesia, using India primarily to source cloth. In contrast, the early English East India Company faced immediate setbacks, including a failed fortification attempt in 1625 that landed their traders in Mughal presence. That failure in the north forced a strategic shift south. The English began looking for leases in regions where the central Mughal government was weakest. In 1639, Francis Day secured a lease for Madras from the Raja of Chandragiri. This land became the site of Fort St. George, the first major English fortress constructed on the subcontinent. While the Dutch relied on corporate shipping cartels, the English survived through a combination of localized diplomacy and the exploitation of fragmented local governments. The European rivals eventually wore each other down. The English broke Portuguese naval power at Swally Hole in 1612 and ended Dutch influence at the Battle of Badara in 1759. With the rivals cleared, the British concentrated their efforts on Bengal, the wealthiest province in the Mughal Empire. Building Fort William near the Ganges created a secure economic hub. By 1698, the company acquired zamindari rights over surrounding villages, including Kalikata, giving them legal authority to collect taxes directly from the local population. Crucially, the Mughals also granted them dastaks, passes that allowed company goods to move duty-free. It was a massive financial privilege, already being quietly abused by company servants for their own private trade. We know the details of these diplomatic maneuvers because of the foreign travelers who lived within the royal courts. Sir Thomas Roe, sent by King James I, spent years traveling with Emperor Jahangir. Roe secured empire-wide factory permissions, allowing company expansion, while his journals provided a rare look at the corruption and court conspiracies of the era. François Bernier, physician to Aurangzeb, documented the brutal wars of succession. Jean-Baptiste Trenger became the first European to detail India's diamond mines under Shah Jahan. Finally, Minucci joined Dara Shikoh's army, providing deep insights into South Indian industries. Mastering the connections between these specific travelers and the monarchs they served is essential for any high-level historical analysis of this period. The European advent was not a single event, but a chain reaction. A feudal crisis in Europe created a need for trade, and an Ottoman blockade dictated the route. To understand this period, we look at 4 pillars: naval extortion via the Kartaz system, cultural syncretism, massive agricultural infusion, and delicate diplomacy. Think back. Which battle ended the Dutch presence in India? Who was the personal physician to Aurangzeb? And which European power introduced the potato to the Indian diet? As we saw in Bengal, the most dangerous tool the British held was the dastak. By the mid-18th century, the rampant misuse of these duty-free passes by corrupt company employees was draining the local treasury dry. When local rulers tried to stop this corruption, the tension snapped. The abuse of the dastak became the direct trigger for the Battle of Plassey, ending the era of the merchant and beginning the era of the company as sovereign ruler.